Hi, welcome to Mindful, the podcast where we take a few minutes to focus on what we should be filling our minds with and, let that other stuff go. For the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about Jesus and kind of what he has to say to us, what he wants to talk to us about,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
So, when you think of we need to talk, hmm, and I was trying to think of my
There's so many different ways that I could take, right? There's a we need to talk, and there's a we need to talk. And tone matters
Yeah,
quite a
it
bit.
does. It does. And eye contact
That's
and how
right.
it's
That's
said.
right.
And I was trying to think of my most like kind of gut dropping, like we need to talks. And I think my worst is when my mom texts me, "Hey Rachel, I need to talk to you. Call me as soon as you can." Yes, yes. And it's rarely like that bad. But I still like sit in that,
They'll
right?
stress. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll stress you
What's
out.
your least favorite? We need to talk.
Oh, I would say definitely, work world, like getting a we need to talk. And I think there might be a generational thing here, but there are texts that I will get from older family members that across the board that will say we need to talk, and they really don't mean anything bad
Mm-mm.
about it, but there's like no context with it whatsoever. That kind of stuff just stresses me out. I'm like, could you just
Yeah.
give me a little something with this? Like, what is it what is it we need to talk about at least a little bit?
So we're learning if you're a we need to talk texter, just give us a few words.
A little
Yeah.
more context is a good thing.
You'll
Yeah,
freak us
yeah,
out
yeah.
less. So this particular like instance of Jesus needing to talk
Yeah.
was at the Last Supper. And one of the things that I was struck by when, you were talking about this on the stage earlier was he was the only one who knew it was going to be a Last Supper. Like,
That's
right?
true. Yeah,
And,
yeah. You're exactly right.
how did that, you think he felt kind of lonely, like sitting down and no one else knew?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good observation. That again, it's easy for us because we know the whole story to just sort of see what's happening. Like, oh, this is, of course they know this is their last moments, but they didn't know that. So yeah, I think the evening. I mean, I'm trying to read into it a little bit, but I think it must have struck them as a little weird. Like that there was a different tone to Jesus than how he had been acting. I mean, certainly at that dinner and then later on he'd go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and the different accounts talk about him like sweating even to the point of blood kind of thing, that the disciples at this point I don't think had ever seen Jesus quite that way before. So I think they must have known something's up, but I don't think they had any clue of exactly what that meant.
Right, right. And I feel like that, and putting it in context too, is a Passover dinner, which should have been a joyful event for
Right,
them,
right.
a celebratory
Yeah.
Jewish, Seder dinner. So when Jesus kind of went off the rails a little bit in that dinner, right?
When you surprise them a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't mean really
No,
off the
I
rails,
get
but
it. Yeah,
in their minds,
absolutely.
they were like, okay, can you describe what Jesus did at one point in this dinner?
Well, I mean, there's lots of parts where he
Yeah.
kind of went off the rails. The one that comes to my mind is that he makes the dinner about himself. Like when they're taking the Passover, like you mentioned, there's the Passover meal, which was significant for anybody who was Jewish to look back and say, okay, this is reminding them of how God had freed the people out of Egypt, very celebratory kind of thing. And Jesus is saying, like, hey, all those symbols that pointed back to Egypt, actually, all of that is about me. It'd almost be like if I got up and said, guys, like Christmas is great, but Christmas is really all about me. Like everybody, you would rightly walk out of the room. You should, because it's heretical. That would have shocked them at that moment to be like, okay, what are you talking about here? Because these have been, hundreds of years of tradition that Jesus is saying, hey, it actually all points to me. I don't know if there's another, I mean, there's lots of moments where he surprised them. Obviously, the foot washing thing, too,
Yeah.
that we talk about was a complete surprise because of just how lowly the task was, and the idea that, hey, nobody as a rabbi, let alone just anybody that was a good Jewish person, would have really done that. And so the fact that he would go to that level must have been not only shocking, but kind of offensive to them.
Right, because he took it the whole way.
Yeah.
Like he stripped down to a towel
Right.
as a servant would wear,
Right.
right?
Exactly right.
He got on his hands and knees. He really did it. Now, something I did not know was the foot washing was not optional for I mean, it was,
Yeah.
but he made it, he pressed it. Can you
Yes.
kind of talk into that?
Well, just that he was saying, like, this needs to happen. In fact, it would have been unusual at this point that the foot washing hadn't happened yet. That
I've
nobody
wondered
else, yeah, that
that.
nobody else had thought to do it. And
Yeah.
almost to the point where, you know, a lot of scholars point out that in the other gospels, the Matthew, Mark, Luke gospel accounts, that what happened right before the dinner is you have the disciples arguing about who's the greatest among them, you know, and they're kind of say, hey, who's going to sit at your right hand? It's a very odd kind of thing. And so in those gospels, the fact that the thing that happens right after that is that there's a moment where none of them had thought to step in to do the foot washing was significant, and probably a little bit of a guilt trip kind of. I mean, Jesus was, I don't think he was trying to give a guilt trip, but if you're sitting there, he's like, okay, the rabbi's getting up to do this. That was quite a statement, and something that probably put their, I mean, put their foot in their mouth is, you know, at that
Yes.
moment to say, wow, I guess why, I mean, wow, he's doing this. We probably should have done this earlier. So yeah, it would have been quite shocking.
Yeah, I can see that. So you had a little bit of a guilt, and then one of the disciples was like, "No, I don't want you to." I don't.
Peter, yeah.
Peter was like, and you can't do that because it's too beneath you.
Yeah.
And what did God or not? What did God? I guess God incarnate. What did Christ say to them?
Yeah, he says, well, unless you wash my feet, you'll have no part of me. Which, you know, again, if it was just about foot washing, that it'd be like, that's a little strange. But how John is structured as a gospel, it's saying like, hey, Jesus is saying, I'm demonstrating something to you that will have greater significance down the road, and so pay attention. Like there's something
Right.
going on here, and so I don't think he's literally saying, hey, if you don't let me like wash your feet in this moment,
Right.
you got to leave the dinner table kind of thing. I think he's saying like, hey, there's a spiritual cleansing that Jesus came to bring, and the only way for us to connect to God is to allow that spiritual cleansing to happen. And if not, then we have no hope of connecting with Jesus. And so that's what he's
Right.
symbolizing with what's happening there. Yeah.
And of course, they understood that at the time, right?
No, they didn't. Yeah, no, they didn't. And that again is encouraging to me
Mhm.
because there's a lot that I don't understand about faith and how things work, and it's almost as if Jesus. I mean, he says it. He's like, you won't understand this right now. It's almost like he knows that in our journey, if you're confused at times, that's actually not a surprise. It's part of the gig a bit.
Right.
That sometimes these things take a long time for them to fully become clear.
And I guess that's true in the Bible too, like you mentioned, not understanding stuff, but our hope is that these things become clear to us as we look closer at what God's saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good example that he left us with. So we also like what the way we would describe this as a humble posture, right?
Yeah.
And I like that. What is it he said you, or I think you said this on stage. We don't attribute it to Jesus unless we should.
Probably, yeah. That's a good thing.
Be, that you want to give grace before it's earned or deserved.
Yeah, be willing to go first was the idea.
Yeah.
That what Jesus did in the Philippians passage, it's Philippians 2, where Jesus, where it's actually the Apostle Paul that's writing more about what Jesus did at the cross, but I think it applies to the foot washing, that God left a comfortable place, he left heaven, to enter into our mess. And he did it before we earned or deserved it. I mean, another passage in Scripture talks about how while we were still sinners, Jesus died for us. And so the model that he set is it's not that something is earned on the front end and then he serves us. He's saying, hey, before you even understand what I'm doing for you, before you've cleaned up your life, like I'm going to do this for you. And that's the example that he set, a challenging one, but an example that he set for us to follow.
And let me ask you, is it ever earned or deserved from us? Like, do we ever get there in life where,
From God?
well, yeah, from God. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some things that we grow in maturity as Christians, but that's different than earning God's salvation and earning His love. It's like the the way that I've heard some of my favorite authors write about it. You know, you talk about the gospel. The gospel message is that Jesus died for us and that nothing a part of that is what saves us. We often think, oh, that's my ticket into heaven. But actually what that's not just our ticket into heaven. It's saying all aspects of the Christian life are based on grace. And grace, the definition of that is unmerited favor. And so I would say, hey, even with all that, like we can mature and we're called to pursue Jesus and do what we can, but that's still not us earning God's love or salvation. All that is unearned, and He bestows that upon us because He loves us.
And that makes it all the more like, it makes it all the more deeper for me, the fact that we should strive to be like him, but we can't ever strive to deserve any of that from him.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something I learned from my dad too, that he has always been a believer in that totally unbelieving grace, like believes it, but doesn't believe why God would give it to him,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
like it's so hard to comprehend.
It should shock us.
Yeah. And so I love that takeaway because none of us deserve it, but we can all get it.
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to talk about is as Easter is coming, because right now we're coming close to Easter.
Yeah.
We are doing an Easter kind of Devo online to kind of walk through some of these things Jesus wants to say to us.
Yeah.
And this devotional, as I understand it, and you can speak into it more, is not just like the old school boring devotional. There's a, you know.
I like that.
Okay, well, they are. You know,
Yeah.
it's more of a, it's not your parents' devotional.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah, I guess not.
You know, it's more of a taking a moment to get closer to God and kind of meditate on, you know, things He wants us to think about. Can you tell us more about
Yeah,
it?
I'm excited about the journey that we have that's coming up because over the next few weeks leading up to Easter, and really it's less of a devotional and more of a chance to read Scripture together as a church, or whoever's watching, you're welcome to join us. So you sign up, and every day over the next 3 weeks, it emails you a passage from John chapters 13 through 17, which is this passage that we're going to be in this entire series. And so each week, like a communicator will talk about a big takeaway, but for those of us that are just kind of trying to prepare our hearts for Easter, this is a cool way to read 10 to 15 verses each day of this last conversation that Jesus has and his heartbeat and what he's all about. And then our worship teams put together a lo-fi meditative, it's like a 1 to 2 minute video where as you hear the music playing, there's some different prompts, maybe a verse from that day's reading that will just guide you to sort of reflect and meditate on Jesus' heart. And so, yeah, I hope everybody does it because I know each time at this time of year, Easter's great, and yet I do want to prepare my heart for it because it's so significant. It seems like it just sort of pops up. And this is a way for it not to pop up, but actually for us to anticipate like all that Jesus did at the cross.
I love that. And I'm actually really excited about this one because I really like that idea of setting an intention at the beginning of your day and kind of dwelling on this each day, a little nugget of it, and getting closer to Jesus as we get closer to Easter. Now, if you would like to come and celebrate Easter with us, or any Sunday, really,
Come on down.
we love to have you. Otherwise, the link for the meditation will be down below, as will all our other stuff like our location and any other resources you need. Feel free to reach out. Thanks for joining us this week, and we will see you next week. Bye.